Dylan needs fat baby daddy gestation to cinch an unborn with RJ or Will. The bold and the beautiful spoilers reveal that we've to ask, does Melissa Dylan need a fat baby daddy? Could Dylan get a gestation story to cinch in her future with RJ Forrester or Will Spencer? Dylan is surely down on her luck and floundering to find a way out of poverty. We can't ignore the fact that one sizzling night with Will or RJ could change everything for Dylan. So far, the show's been teasing a possible Dylan and Will pairing as well as one between Dylan and RJ. There's chemistry in both cases, so Dylan could end up hitting the wastes with one or both of them ultimately. Electra Forrester will be part of this love quadrangle as well, but let's focus on Dylan for a moment since she's the bone. In need of a major life upgrade, however, he might find himself with another surprise gestation situation. If Dylan heads to the bedroom with Will at some point, it'd be a bit different than what happened with Luna Nozawa since Dylan isn't an hung-up lunatic, but Will could still find himself facing fatherhood sooner than he planned. Of course, if Dylan has a Spencer heir at law, also she could come part of a veritably fat family and conglomerate. Dylan might lock in a rich Spencer future if she eventually has Will's baby. On the other hand, Dylan could get pregnant by RJ rather if they take their own turn in bed together. Perhaps Dylan could find herself carrying a little Forrester and come part of that heritage in the end. Naturally, Dylan might face allegations about getting pregnant on purpose if she does wind up with a Spencer or Forrester bun in the roaster. It's possible Dylan really could resort to some manipulation then, but it's also possible for it to be unplanned on her part too. Anyhow, Dylan could use a path to fiscal security, so will BMB deliver a adulatory bone by letting her have a Forrester or Spencer baby. The bold and the beautiful spoilers say Dylan will make some updates to her world in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for any big news to come. On the ever-turbulent oil of the bold and the beautiful, many themes are as enduring, or as strongly dramatic as love triangles, unanticipated gravidity, and the intoxicating pull of power and heritage. In this imagined plot, Dylan finds herself at the veritably center of a storm that could review not only her own fortune but the futures of two of Los Angeles's most important families, the Forresters and the Spencers. Down on her luck, scraping by, and hopeless for stability, Dylan isn't painted as a villain, but as a youthful woman gaping at a crossroads where one impulsive decision could permanently alter her life's line. From the moment Dylan reappeared in Los Angeles, it was clear she carried further than just emotional baggage. She carried ambition, vulnerability, and a quiet hunger for security. In a megacity where fashion conglomerates rise and fall at the hands of heritage names, survival without an important surname can feel nearly insolvable. Dylan's fiscal insecurity has been subtly woven into recent occurrences: overdue rent, side jobs that slightly cover groceries, and the demotion of watching others glide through life gentled by generational wealth. The discrepancy is sharpest when she's around RJ Forrester and Will Spencer, two heirs at law who may struggle emotionally but will no way worry about their coming mess. RJ, the sensitive creative spirit of the Forrester dynasty, represents stability wrapped in warmth. As the son of Rich Forrester and Brooke Logan, RJ carries both passion and heritage in his blood. His connection to Forrester Creations isn't just business, it's heritage. When he looks at Dylan, he doesn't see a social rambler. He sees someone wounded but genuine. Their scenes crinkle with emotional closeness rather than reckless heat. However, the plot would lean heavily into themes of family acceptance, heritage protection, if Dylan were to come pregnant with RJ's child. The Forresters, especially Ridge, would inescapably question Dylan's motives. Would they believe it was an accident? Or would they assume manipulation? On the other hand, Will Spencer brings a different energy entirely. As the son of media Napoleon Bill Spencer Jr., Will's life has always been defined by power, influence, and a certain ruthless edge. Though youngish and still sculpturing his own identity, he carries the Spencer intensity in his DNA. His chemistry with Dylan simmers with unpredictability. Their relations feel impulsive, charged, and dangerous. A night of passion between them wouldn't be born from comfort. It would be fueled by defiance, loneliness, and desire. However, the fallout would be seismic. If Dylan were to discover she's carrying a Spencer heir at law, Bill would incontinently go into protection mode, suspicious of Dylan's intentions and determined to shield his son from reproach. The brilliance of this implicit gestation plot lies in its moral nebulosity. As the pressure deepens in the bold and the beautiful, Dylan's possible gestation plot would not simply unfold as a predictable cleaner twist, It would unravel subcast by subcast, exposing precariousness, intentions, and long-buried family injuries. What makes this bow especially compelling is that it places a socially vulnerable character at the crossroad of two dynasties that define Los Angeles power: the Forresters and the Spencers. Dylan is Aunt walking into neutral home. She's stepping into a battleground disguised as love. In the weeks following that cataclysmal night, whether with RJ or Will, subtle suggestions would begin to surface. A missed appointment. A surge of nausea at Forrester Creations during a high-profile design review. A distracted expression while RJ excitedly discusses a new couture line. The camera would loiter on Dylan's face just long enough for observers to sense commodity shifting internally before she indeed confirms it herself. When the gestation test eventually reveals the verity, the emotional weight would hit in silence first. Dylan alone in her modest apartment, gaping at the small plastic stick that suddenly holds the key to her future. This is intermediate triumph. It's fear, unbelief, computation, and hope colliding at formerly. She knows what this could mean, but she also knows what allegations will follow. Still, the emotional tone of the plot would lean heavily on closeness and vulnerability, if RJ is the father. RJ has always been portrayed as more sensitive than his father, Ridge. He carries the cultural passion of the Forrester birth without the same tough indubitation. When Dylan confesses, maybe in a quiet corner of the design office late at night, RJ's response would be concentrated shock, yes, but also a deep instinct to cover. His first words might not be about mistrustfulness but about responsibility. Still, responsibility inside the Forrester family is no way simple. Ridge Forrester, fiercely defensive of both his heritage and his son, would demand clarity. He has seen too numerous dishonors hang the family conglomerate to accept anything blindly. Ridge would probably contend on a maternity test, not out of atrocity but out of caution. His jests with complicated loves have tutored him that feelings can cloud judgment. Brooke Logan, on the other hand, would see echoes of her own controversial history in Dylan's situation. Brooke has long been judged for her romantic snares and allegations of ambition. She might be the first to extend compassion, prompting Ridge not to condemn Dylan precociously. Brooke understands what it feels like to be perceived as opportunistic when love and survival intersect. Family feasts at the Forrester manse would grow tense. RJ, trying to bridge fidelity between Dylan and his parents, would struggle under pressure. Ridge's delving questions. Brooke's attempts at agreement. Rumored enterprise from extended family members about Dylan's intentions. Indeed, workers at Forrester Creations would begin to dish. Fashion houses are erected on creativity, but they thrive on rumors. Meanwhile, if Will Spencer is the father, the narrative shifts into a further commercial and strategic tone. Will is still developing his identity, living in the shadow of Bill Spencer Jr., a man known for ruthless business instincts. Bill would not respond emotionally first, he would respond strategically. Upon literacy of Dylan's gestation, Bill's immediate concern would be damage control. Media captions. Shareholder responses. The Spencer brand. Bill would probably summon Dylan to his office for a private meeting, one framed as concern but concentrated with intimidation. He might offer fiscal security in exchange for discretion, or indeed propose a fairly binding agreement outlining guardianship and heritage terms before the baby is indeed born. But Will, unlike his father, may reject that transactional approach. This could come a defining moment for his character growth. Rather of allowing Bill to mandate the narrative, Will might choose to intimately admit the gestation, asserting his independence. That decision would produce a rift between father and son, kindling generational conflict within the Spencer conglomerate. Electra's part in this plot cannot be understated. Deposited as romantic rival and social equal to RJ and Will, she'd struggle deeply with covetousness and betrayal. However, Electra might charge her openly of manipulation if Dylan becomes pregnant. Scenes between them would be fiery. Allegations hurled in dressing apartments, competitions at charity festivals, sharp words changed during fashion launches. Electra might dig into Dylan's history, searching for evidence of advised jest. Any inconsistency, any late payment, any once relationship could be weaponized. The emotional risk on Dylan would consolidate as she realizes that carrying an important heir at law doesn't shield her from scrutiny. It magnifies it. As the gestation progresses, the show could explore Dylan's internal conflict more deeply. Does she truly want fatherhood, or is she adhering to the stability it promises? Late-night scenes might show her reading about antenatal care, touching her stomach with query. The glamour of wealth fades when brazened with the raw reality of raising a child. Medical movables would come dramatic events, however. The suspension girding maternity results would stretch across multiple occurrences, if both RJ and Will are presumptive fathers. Imagine a sanitarium corridor scene, both families gathered, pressure thick enough to cut. Ridge standing rigid beside Brooke, Bill watching with narrowed eyes. RJ pacing, Will silent but determined. Dylan seated, pale but bent. When the envelope containing test results eventually arrives, the pause before it's opened would feel monumental. In cleaner pieces tradition, interruptions are possible. A fire alarm, a lost train, a delayed courier, stretching expectation to its breaking point. But once the verity is revealed, alliances would incontinently reshape. Still, the Forrester dynasty expands if it's RJ's child. Ridge's jubilation might soften the moment he holds ultrasound images of his grandchild. The idea of heritage frequently overrides pride. Brooke would probably embrace Dylan intimately, signaling family consanity. Yet subtle pressure could remain. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. Still, Bill's conglomerate gains a new successor, if it's Will's baby. Bill might essay to fester the narrative to his advantage, publicizing the unborn Spencer heir at law with calculated pride. Public statements, press conferences, strategic philanthropy timed to coincide with the advertisement. Dylan would suddenly find herself under violent media limelight, her once deconstructed by tabloids. But beyond wealth and heritage, the emotional crux lies with Dylan's growth. Throughout this bow, she'd defy who she truly is. However, fatherhood could transfigure her perspective. If she originally considered the gestation as a pathway out of poverty, her proceedances might shift from survival to protection. She might reject manipulative openings offered by either family in favor of autonomy. There's also implicit for a twist: what if the gestation complications force both families to unite? A health dread could temporarily dissolve battles. Hospital scenes where Ridge and Bill stand side by side, united by concern for an future grandchild, would produce rare moments of vulnerability between longtime adversaries. Another possibility involves Dylan choosing independence entirely. Rather of securing her future through marriage or contracts, she might decide to raise the child on her own terms, demanding support but not surrendering control. That choice would review her from perceived opportunist to empowered single mama navigating elite society without losing herself. The fashion world background ensures that indeed intimate emotional beats due against glamorous settings. Runway shows intruded by breaking news. Board meetings derailed by particular exposures. Baby shower assignations doubling as public statements of constancy. As months pass within the plot, observers would witness character elaboration. RJ might develop into a devoted mate and father, balancing creativity with responsibility. Will might defy his father's influence, shaping a more compassionate leadership style. Ridge and Bill could rediscover precedences beyond profit perimeters. And Dylan? She'd no longer be the girl in need of a life upgrade. She'd come central to the coming generation's story. In classic cleaner fashion, secrets might still lurk. A lost maternity sample. A medical lab error. The possibility that neither RJ nor Will is the father could introduce another subcast of shock. But indeed, without that twist, the emotional terrain remains rich. Eventually, the brilliance of this extended bow lies in its thematic resonance: security versus love, heritage versus individuality, power versus vulnerability. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, gestation is no way just about a baby. It's about heritage, character, and the fragile balance between ambition and authenticity. Still, it could review alliances, challenge hypotheticals, if Dylan's story continues along this path. And as always in this glamorous macrocosm, every rumored secret has the power to echo through boardrooms, bedrooms, and beyond. As this plot stretches deeper into the emotional and commercial fabric of the bold and the beautiful, the true impact of Dylan's gestation would begin to ripple far beyond the original shock. What starts as a particular disclosure would inescapably come a public reckoning, one that forces every major player to defy their values, their fears, and their vulnerabilities. By the alternate trimester, The situation would no longer be academic gossip rumored in hallways at Forrester Creations or Spencer Publications. It would be reality. The physical visibility of Dylan's gestation would make denial insolvable. Where formerly there were dubieties and allegations, now there's palpable evidence that a new generation is on the way. Still, the Forrester family dynamic would shift in subtle but meaningful ways if RJ is verified as the father. RJ, long seen as the cultural son still chancing his footing, would suddenly be thrust into majority. Designing couture gowns and sketching bold generalities for runway shows would take on new urgency. He is no longer just creating fashion. He's creating a future. Ridge, who has spent decades guarding the Forrester heritage, might begin mentoring RJ more seriously, seeing in him not just a son but the father of his grandchild. Brooke, ever the emotional compass of the family, would probably form a conservative but sincere bond with Dylan. Their exchanges could be concentrated with participated jests about being judged, misneu, and undervalued. Brooke might see in Dylan the same adaptability she formerly demanded when navigating important families and complex loves. Still, peace inside the Forrester manse would not be immediate. Extended family members might remain skeptical. Board members could still question whether RJ's focus will falter. Investors might worry about reproach affecting the brand. In the world of high fashion, perception is currency. A gestation reproach, no matter how famed, can still be weaponized by challengers. Still, the Spencer world would erupt with a different kind of intensity if Will is the verified father. Bill Spencer Jr., a man who erected an conglomerate through calculated pitfalls and aggressive strategy, would view this development through a lens of control. He may essay to orchestrate every aspect of the narrative, from press releases to private security arrangements for Dylan. Yet the further Bill tries to control the situation, the more likely Will is to push back. This could become the emotional centerpiece of the bow, a son stepping out from under his father's assessing shadow. Will might contend on attending Croker's movables, defending Dylan intimately, and rejecting any attempt to reduce the baby to a commercial asset. Dylan, caught between these important forces, would begin to fate that her topmost challenge isn't securing fiscal stability, it is guarding her autonomy. The wealth and prestige girding her are intoxicating but stifling. She might find herself craving for the simplicity she formerly despised. Mid-pregnancy stories could explore complications, not inescapably medical extremities, but emotional strain. Hormones, stress, public scrutiny. Shooters outside her apartment. Fashion bloggers assuming about whether she planned the gestation. Anonymous sources feeding tabloids rumors about maternity controversies, indeed after evidence. Electra's part would probably consolidate rather than fade, however. Her heartache could transubstantiate into bitterness if she loses RJ or Will because of the gestation. She might align herself with skeptical family members, subtly undermining Dylan at public events. A sharp comment during a fashion fete. An advised memorial of timing. The pressure between them would add combustive energy to Elle's celebratory moments. Meanwhile, the future child would come a symbol, occasionally of stopgap, occasionally of leverage. However, it represents cultural heritage and romantic fortune. If RJ's child, however, it symbolizes commercial race and media conglomerate durability, if Will's. But for Dylan, the baby becomes commodity, far more intimate, a reason to review herself. There could be a vital scene where Dylan visits her old neighborhood, maybe a modest area far removed from Beverly Hills glamour. She walks familiar thoroughfares, reflecting on who she was before entering the route of Dynasties. In that moment, she may realize that wealth alone cannot anchor her identity. The baby deserves stability embedded in love, not strategy. As the due date approaches, alliances might suddenly soften. Ridge and Bill, longtime rivals, could partake a rare discussion about grandfatherhood. Beneath their competitive surfaces lies participated expectation. The appearance of a grandchild has the implicit to humanize indeed the most toughened businessman. Labor and delivery would really be a high-drama event. In classic cleaner fashion, timing could coincide with a major fashion show or commercial junction advertisement. Phones buzzing in boardrooms. A runway trial intruded by critical news. RJ or Will rushing through Los Angeles business to reach the sanitarium. Sanitarium scenes would be emotionally charged. Family members pacing sterile corridors. Old grievances shortly forgotten in the face of new life. Dylan enduring labor not as a pawn or opportunist, but as a woman bringing a child into the world amid extraordinary pressure. When the baby is eventually born, everything changes. Still, the first moments would reset dynamics if it's a healthy delivery. Ridge holding his grandchild. Bill gaping at a bitsy Spencer heir at law. Brooke tearfully embracing Dylan. Will or RJ overwhelmed by responsibility and admiration. The power struggle.